Hello and welcome to the Video Game Sage. I've been playing Nintendo games since the original NES came out. Playing video games is a love that has stayed with me my whole life. I've shared it with my family, and it led me to create this channel in my 40s so I could share some of that love. As a huge Nintendo fan, the release of the Switch 2 is a major event. The original Switch is the primary system that my family plays video games on, and once we had the Switch 2, we spent a lot of time testing different games. The backwards compatibility is remarkable, and I've noticed a lot of interesting differences in how the Switch 2 handles older games. In this series, we'll be going over those differences. We'll go over individual games as well as a few franchises. You may expect me to go over certain kinds of games, but hopefully I have a few surprises for you. The Legend of Zelda series might be my favorite of all time. When the original game was released, I played the heck out of it. It was the first game I beat on my own, and it was the reason I subscribed to Nintendo Power. I have eagerly played every single new game that was released since then. I've bought consoles specifically for Zelda games. By the time Breath of the Wild came along, I was ready for the series to evolve and change. We've received 3 brand new games during the life of the Switch: Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and Echoes of Wisdom. These games have totally redefined what the franchise can be. Breath of the Wild may be the best game of all time. It's certainly at the top of my list. I completed it on Wii U. I bought it again on the Switch and its DLC too. Since then, I've played through it multiple times, including playing it with my child. This game, more than any other, was so thoughtfully designed and so expertly crafted that for me it achieves a rare level of greatness that not only reminds me what a great game can be, but what Nintendo can do that so few other companies can match. What makes this game great is something I'll cover another time. Stay tuned. Tears of the Kingdom is also great, but sadly repurposes elements from Breath of the Wild in ways that aren't as satisfying. Echoes of Wisdom was the surprise return to old-school overhead gameplay that I didn't know I needed. I really enjoyed it and think it's a worthy, modern interpretation of the overhead style. The fact that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom received full paid upgrades for Switch 2 was huge news. Echoes also received a smaller-scale free update. Many videos and opinions have spread around in the weeks since the launch of Switch 2, and they're almost all unanimously positive. I believe you can be a fan of something and not have blind love. I believe you can be honest and critical of something without having to hate it. So the question is, do I agree with all the opinions? Yes, but... A quick note about load times. They're super fast. They've been improved dramatically. Everything loads up super quick. Good job, Nintendo. We'll start with an examination of 2 similar scenes just outside the throne room. Let's compare it in a few different ways. You can see the upgrades on full display here. The frame rate increase, the fluidity, the quality of the textures. It's all exactly what you would hope from this kind of update. The vibrant colors, the glowing reds and blues, it's all exactly how you want the game to look. The day I got my Switch 2, I decided fighting Calamity Ganon would be the best way to see all the upgrades in action, and I wasn't wrong.
Link. I'm sorry, but my power isn't strong enough. I can't hold.
Everything about it shows off the textures, the frame rates, the colors, The lighting effects, the smoke effects, everything. Every second that passed, my excitement grew. This scene builds up to this incredible crescendo where you are faced with an enemy you may not be able to defeat, just for the game to remind you that you aren't alone. And that's when I noticed something was off, and nobody else has talked about it.
Now my moment has finally come. Brace yourself.
Gameplay was increased to 60 frames per second, but the movies remain at 30. They were not remastered. The difference is notable and took me out of the moment. Nintendo has always been about immersion in the game, where the cutscenes look the same as gameplay, and they are in-engine whenever possible. That these cutscenes are movie files is not a surprise. That they did not get remastered to run at 60 frames per second with HDR color in a game where they are charging money for the upgrade is surprising and disappointing.
Our moment has arrived.
The game loads each champion's movie individually in case you didn't complete their quests. The Switch 2 loads them just a hair faster than the Switch. This is fascinating and resulted in the Switch 2 scene being completed just a hair sooner than Switch 1. The two don't stay synced up like I expected. I wanted to show a Flurry Rush side by side. As expected, they look incredible. I did find that the jump to 60 frames per second affected my timing, and I had to increase my camera speed on Switch 2 to compensate. The increase in fluidity is just an incredible upgrade. Moving around, running from the lightning attack really demonstrates the difference in the motions. The ice blocks flying at you feel like they're coming faster, and it feels way more epic. Moving into Phase 2, his glowing shield already looked awesome, but it jumps off the screen now. I'm reacting to similar movements here, and the fluidity actually helps me reflect his attack back at him. Sadly, with the Guardian laser, I was too early. This phase is defeated, and he's leaking. The detail on it is just incredible. As we move into his final form, it's interesting that the difference in frame rate unsyncs the two scenes slightly. The Switch 2 somehow just runs things faster than the Switch 1. The grass really stands out to me for some reason, as well as the colors overall. The HDR allows for the colors to still be there, but they're subtler on Switch 2. I resync here and zoom in, and it really shows off that wider but subtler color gamut. The glow of the dark beast isn't quite as prevalent, but still radiates out and colors the rest of the scene. The other thing I really like is how the creeping malice of his skin is more stable and detailed, but you can also see an effect in the air that distorts your vision, as if his rage is actually creating heat waves. Here you can see that the faster camera took me a second to get used to, and I missed my first shot on Switch 2, but I quickly adjusted and got off 2 more in the same time it took me to get 1 good shot on Switch 1. The frame rate increase caused me to speed up my camera, but the overall effect just gives you a greater feeling of control. As I get the second to last shot, we can see the rain falling and the oppressive red sky looming overhead. On Switch 2, you can see that sky even more clearly, hinting at the doom that's come with failure. It's a chaotic scene on both systems, but there is a dark beauty on Switch 2 that wasn't quite there before. Getting the final shot is a little weird because they don't sync at all until the screen fades out. Switch 1 takes so much longer in that moment, where the Switch 2 just moves us along into the final cutscene. Again, this scene is a movie file, and it is the same resolution, color space, and frame rate as Switch 1. After the dynamism given to us during the final battle, it's a disappointment. Zelda's incredible moment, and one of the only times we see the Triforce, deserves to look as beautiful as everything else. Is this a game changer for me? Would I tell someone not to pay for the upgrade for the Switch 2 edition just because of this? No. But as a true Nintendo fan, I believe 2 things can be true. It's true that the upgrades they've given us for Switch 2 are incredible and make an already near-perfect game that much better. But it's also true that missing this kind of detail on a paid upgrade is a disappointment. I know remastering the movies into 4K HDR 60 frames per second would dramatically increase their file size, but I think it's worth it. Zelda is a premier series, and this is how it's represented on the Switch 2 at launch. It should be at its best from top to bottom. Enough about that for now. Let's move on to Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom, though not as satisfying as Breath of the Wild, is an incredible game. It was already a visual improvement on its predecessor, and it's a joy to look at on the Switch too. I chose the battle with Calamity Ganon for Breath of the Wild because it shows off the best of the game. Tears of the Kingdom's final battles are a different story. They're much longer, much more involved, and to be honest, I've only done it once. For Tears, I thought it best to show off more gameplay segments that could demonstrate how the scope of this world is presented on Switch 2. Moving around the Great Sky Island near the Temple of Time allows us to see the differences of that first major selling point for the game. Using the Ascend ability is a great showcase for that increase in frame rate. The particles move so much more smoothly. The sand textures on the ground appear with more granularity. Moving up to the temple entrance, and everything is just clearer and cleaner. That improvement is consistent, and the detail on the textures for Switch 2 really do pop. One thing I think is interesting is that when you are high up like this with total visibility, the Switch 2's view isn't dramatically better. The draw distance isn't much better. Things just look cleaner. The game already had an incredible draw distance, so to a certain extent, I guess if it isn't broke, don't fix it. One element I thought would be a great comparison is just falling all the way from the Sky Island into the depths. I've tried to sync up a few common elements of the fall. Like Breath of the Wild, Tears has a greater depth of color. The Switch 1 footage is very green and brown, while the Switch 2 footage appears lighter, but it's not washed out. The color gamut is wider, and there is more subtlety in how it looks. It's much more like you are looking through the air at something in the distance, and it looks more natural. As we complete the dive into the depths, you can see that increased color depth. Yes, my Switch 2 footage is a little bit lighter overall, but everything just looks clean. I'm using the classic air bike build to look around the depths. It does seem that aside from a higher resolution and a wider color palette, Nintendo has made a change so that the depths aren't quite as dark. In this save file, all of the depths are lit, so I can't show you how it looks while dark, but it does appear not quite as oppressive. You can see this walking around more on foot. It does feel less oppressive. The frame rate doesn't stutter at all, which could still be an issue on Switch 1. There's just a greater level of stability that warrants the upgrade. Next, we'll go through a shrine. Honestly, I'm running out of things to say. Everything just looks better, runs smoother, and plays the way it was intended. I think Tears of the Kingdom was developed with the Switch 2 in mind, just as Breath of the Wild was developed for the Wii U and Switch 1 at the same time. I think Nintendo released the Switch 2 later than perhaps initially intended. But that may not be true. The evidence working against me is once again the cutscenes. I've chosen the Birth of the Demon King as my showcase here, in part because it's just frickin' awesome, but in part because it really shows a lot of color. But we can see here there is no change to the frame rate or resolution. It's the same movie file running in both versions of the game. Again, this isn't really a deal breaker for me, and I wouldn't tell someone not to pay for the upgrade, but it's still surprising to see. The scenes in this game are where we see Ganondorf in his grandest malevolent splendor, and Zelda's story arc through these scenes really define the meaning of The Legend of Zelda. They deserve to be at the highest quality.
Sonia! You were too late, Rauru. You took for granted the godlike power you had in your hands. Do you now see the potential you squandered? As for her, she is merely the first victim of your arrogance. You tried to control me, Rauru, and you will die knowing that you failed. Get it done!
Prince Sonia needs you.
As far as load times, no surprise, they're super quick. You could almost be through the start screen and into the game on Switch 2 in the time it takes the Switch 1 just to get past that logo. Teleporting from Akala region to the Great Sky Island, and anywhere else in the game for that matter, is just so much quicker. Well done, Nintendo. Finally, we'll take a quick look at Echoes of Wisdom. This is an old-school overhead Zelda game, but made with the modern option-rich open-world design as Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I really enjoyed it, but it was definitely bumping against the Switch 1's limitations. I didn't mind, but it was a very stuttery experience rife with slowdown. The game got a free update with Switch 2, and it certainly helps. Running around the Lost Woods really shows a few things. First, there is no frame rate stutter on Switch 2. Second, and more pleasing to me, is that the forced focus blur at the tops and bottoms of the screen are a lot smoother and more natural feeling on Switch 2. I'm not a big fan of the effect, and I think the way that they have it for Switch 2 is how they originally intended it from the beginning. Going into Castletown continues to show the lack of stutter, and the textures look so much better. Doing a quick freeze frame zoomed in speaking to a guard shows those textures are much smoother, and that blur effect I mentioned is so much more subtle. I never played the Link's Awakening remake on Switch 1. Seeing how good Echoes looks on Switch 2 may just convince me to go back and try Link's Awakening. Zelda fans were lucky to get 3 original games for Switch 1. All 3 are great games, and each one alone is reason enough to buy Switch 1 or a Switch 2. The upgrades present on Switch 2 for Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are certainly worth the price. But as I've noted, they didn't improve every aspect of those games. 2 things can be true, and while I would say these upgrades are worth the money, it's still disappointing that the cutscene movies were not remastered as well. In the end, there is absolutely no reason someone should not play these 3 games on Switch 2 and pay for the upgrades for the Switch 2 editions. Breath of the Wild has more to gain from these upgrades, but both are worth it. I have not yet done a full playthrough of either game, and I have not done any testing of the new Zelda Notes feature. As a huge lore junkie, I am certainly looking forward to that, and that additional feature may just override my disappointment about the movies. That's all for now. I'll have more to say about these games in the future, so if you've enjoyed this video, give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and click that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. Thank you for spending some time with me today, and I hope I've entertained you a little bit. Until next time, Sage out.